It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
To infinity and beyond!
Get off, Napoleon. Make yourself a dang quesadilla.
I know Kung Fu.
This is one doodle that can't be undid, Holmes Gillett.
And my axe.
This should be open because it's civil rights. This is the 90s.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
1.21 gigawatts.
I'm gonna make this pencil disappear.
Gucci.
Okay. Welcome to KendallCast Movie Roundtable. I'm your host, Kendall. With me, as always, is Ian.
I sound my barbaric yop to you all.
I think you clipped on the yop. Awesome. Nick.
I refuse to participate.
and Jeff.
I can't help but fight this urge to throw a desk set into the river.
Okay, we're talking about Dead Poets Society. I think it was one of the movies that in the finale of Ted Lasso season 3 they said was a perfect movie. If I remember right, I believe Coach Beard said that you used Dead Poets Society as an example of a perfect movie when they were talking about how there's no such thing as perfection. Ted Lasso season 3 is great. That's not a spoiler, I don't think. But
let's hope not.
But yeah, I mean, this is a good movie, right? Kendall, why did you choose this movie?
Kendall, why did you choose this movie?
Why don't you tell us?
So this movie is pretty special to me. Like it's a little schmaltzy and it's a little, so it's a little bit self-indulgent, but it's like one of these because it's from 1989. It's one of these movies that like you can kind of forgive the cliches because like I'm sure they existed before this movie, but like this is the example of that now.
Right. They helped to define the cliche itself.
Yeah, and it's like I don't know, when I first saw it in high school, it was in U.S. literature class.
Yep. After
we had read a bunch of stuff about the Emerson and Poe and all these people who he like makes these little references to. I particularly remember that like the "Oh Captain, My Captain" poem by Edgar Allan Poe is like the most unremarkable thing that Edgar Allan Poe wrote. It's nothing like anything else he wrote because it's just like a poem about how awesome Abraham Lincoln is.
How is it rate on the greatness scale?
Yes, the Pritchard scale.
Yes.
That seems like a pretty reasonable way to rate poetry, I was thinking.
If you have to come up with a mathematical way to rate it, I don't know. I mean, how else would you do it?
I mean, I would say...
Okay, so that that kind of becomes the basis for the things that I don't like about this movie. But maybe I can wait my turn.
Yeah. Well,
Kendall wax poetic about it.
Yeah. Well, so
everyone take a break.
I saw it in I saw it in U.S. literature class, and it was just like, and the first time I saw it, it was like all these references and stuff that the movie makes are very surface level of that literature and stuff, and I thought, oh, I'm all better than that. And then I saw it a few years later, and I was like, oh, all these references are reminding me of all that great literature, and that's the whole point of the movie is exposing these kids to stuff, and I don't know. I felt like there's just a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's over the top, but also there's a lot of stuff that's just like real, and it just does this movie just is done with so much craft. There's a few scenes with Robin Williams that I'm a little he's doing his genie
Marlon Brando
a little bit too much.
Does Shakespeare.
The Marlon Brando scene, especially because Marlon Brando like probably was doing Shakespeare at the time.
But like you get Robin Williams to play a role, like that's one of the things he's going to bring,
right?
And it's one of the reasons you hire him in the first place.
Right. This is him actually trying to get away from that to a certain extent, but
well,
he's got to throw it in a little bit.
Well, I don't even know where Robin Williams was at in his career at this time because this is 89, so it's before all the cuckoo bananas stuff that he did in the 90s. He's basically...
But it is after Good Morning Vietnam.
Okay, it's after Good Morning Vietnam. So he's done Good Morning Vietnam, which is another pretty serious movie. No, so we lost a little bit of audio, but basically Ian pointed out that, or no, that was in the audio. Never mind. But I would say, but what the point that got cut off was that that this film and Good Morning Vietnam are sort of they are similar in the sense that they're dealing with serious issues, but Robin Williams still kind of doing his shtick, as opposed to Good Will Hunting, where Robin Williams is just, he's not trying to make anybody laugh. Then Jeff brought up some other movie that's probably bad.
What'd you bring up?
It's called World's Greatest Dad. It's lesser known, but it's about Robin Williams as a failed writer with like a jerk face of a kid who like commits suicide in like this horribly embarrassing way. So he fudges the scenario and fake writes a bunch of memoirs from him to get.
I'm pretty sure that that's like a movie that everybody hates.
Yeah, but he's like really serious in it. Right?
Okay,
like, it's not. Okay.
And then I mentioned What Dreams May Come.
Yeah,
that's another
okay.
one.
That's another
one.
He plays it straight.
But anyway, but anyway, so I watched it a few years, or probably 10 years ago now, and I liked it a lot better then because I was a little bit removed from the material that's referenced. And then this time I watched it, and first of all, that's freaking Ethan Hawke.
Right.
Yes, it is.
Which
being very un-Ethan Hawke-like.
Yeah, exactly, because Ethan Hawke is one of those guys that's very, very typecast. Like he does. Yeah. I freaking love that one movie that he's in, and the other movie.
Right.
I like his other movie, but not the other movie. That one.
No, freaking, I can't think tonight. The one where Reality Bites. I really like him. I like him in Reality Bites a lot. I like him in there's a Richard Linklater movie called Tape that he plays a really interesting character in, and he shows up in a lot of stuff.
For some reason, I thought of Gattaca first when I saw him because I'd seen that fairly recently.
Yeah,
that's a good movie.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's obviously a very different character, and I think this must have been one of his earliest roles because he's so freaking young. Yeah. Just the cast is phenomenal on this. But yeah, on this viewing, first of all, I noticed the guy that's his roommate that with the abusive dad,
Neil.
We'll get into that more probably as it goes on, but I thought that they handled his character really, really. It was really interesting how they handled his character, because I was telling my wife when I watched it earlier, or when I was younger, I felt like he was acting completely reasonable until the end where he got pushed over the edge. But on this viewing, I'm like, oh, that's because I was dealing with mental health issues at the time and not realizing how unreasonable I was. Like, he is clearly bipolar throughout the whole movie. And in that that moment where the obnoxious redhead kid says, if it wasn't for Keating, he'd be up in his room studying right now. It's like, I don't think that's...
He deserved to get punched in the face.
Well, yeah. But I don't even think that that's like accurate. Like he could have... This guy had much bigger issues.
He was a time bomb.
Right. Yeah. And it goes from the beginning where every interaction you see with his father, he can't. It's like it's this thing where that it's like I don't know if it's codependence or what, but it's like this where it's like you're trying to say something to somebody and they're not, even if they think they're trying to listen, like they say that the one thing that makes it so you can't talk, you can't say what you want to say. Like when he says, what about what I want? And he says, well, what do you want?
Tell me how you feel.
Yeah, tell me how you feel. But just make sure it's not about this acting thing, because that's dumb. And it's like, well, that's the thing that he wanted to express to you, right, and you just told him that he's not allowed to say that. And it's taking every ounce of his will to just say, I want to say something. Yeah. And then I've been on that side of nothing on that, nothing quite on that scale, but like, I've had romantic relationships where that was a thing, where we're in a fight, and maybe we both still care about each other, but we're still in a fight, and I try to push something, and then she figures out the one thing to say that will just destroy me. And yeah, that is not my wife that I'm referring to, by the way. That is an ex-girlfriend from my early 20s.
Long time ago.
Yeah, long time ago. Late teens, early 20s. But a couple of relationships actually were kind of like that. But like, yeah, it's I don't know, just this film just it crafted well and stuff. I've been rambling for a long time. So somebody else talk.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and go next. So I'm also kind of inclined to agree with Ted Lasso here, in that I do think this movie is almost near perfect. And even, like, I think the biggest flaw that you can probably identify with this movie is that you can make an argument that the ending is a little too dramatic.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I kind of assumed you're going to go there, and I'm prepared to defend it later, but before that, I think this movie works so well because I also really identify with this film on a personal level. Because like I think this movie is just incredible because it speaks to the importance and necessity of free thought, right? And if you just watch the first 75% of this movie, right, you would think, oh, this movie's sort of romanticizing thinking for yourself and bucking against the trends and being the lone voice in the wilderness, and it almost comes across as hokey and unrealistic, and yet by the end of the movie that entire process comes crashing down, right? And you see that actually, no, in order to like think in order to like have your own views and to have unpopular opinions and to think for yourself, even in a way that's healthy and constructive, right? There is a price to be paid for that. And again, you can argue that price was too dramatic in this particular movie, but in my own professional life, I encountered stuff like that, right? Where I had unpopular opinions and I had to voice them and I paid a cost for it, right? And I feel like this movie does a great job of articulating that cost well, but even still, at the end, you can't help but kind of argue that sticking to your guns in that way is worth it. And that's what I appreciated about it.
All right, so before Ian gets too deep into his list, because I can see the words on his phone, and there's a lot of them there. I just want to say that this is kind of, it's a beautiful kind of inspirational movie, and I hate to say this, but at the same time, like, it is the most beautiful movie with one of the worst plots, I think, and foreshadowing, and the story is just not particularly well delivered. I think that a lot of the focus could have been done on either fewer students or compressing it a little bit. More emphasis on, I think, showing things before they happened, before big plot devices come out of the wings and just cram the story off into a random direction that it wasn't really going before. I think that I'm not entirely sure how accurate their interpretations of any of the poetry is, but at the same time, like, it doesn't matter because the whole point of the movie is that it's what you feel. I'm not entirely sure if that's correct for most of the things they go with. And I also wanted to mention that you were talking about, it's all about fighting, just going along with the flow, and you got to think for yourself and everything. But at the same time, every time he gives one of these things, everyone conforms to what he's looking at. When he gets up on the desk, everyone has to look from the exact same perspective as him.
No. Well, yeah. Okay.
So he shows it. He gets up on the desk and he's like, take a look around. And he makes everyone do exactly what he does.
Well, I think you can make an argument, though, that, like, being able to think for yourself is a learned skill, right? It is not something that comes naturally. I think the inherent human condition is to conform intellectually to those around us.
Yeah.
And even in my own life, I can feel myself doing that given the context that I'm in, right?
It's an interesting just contrast between what he's saying and what's kind of happening on a sub-level.
I think his purpose is, yes, he makes them all stand on the desk and look around, or he makes them all walk around in the courtyard, with the exception of that one guy who doesn't, right? But those are learned skills, and then hopefully if you've sort of done those patterns patterns and internalize them, then you can move on and start kind of having your own opinions and doing your own thing. But you kind of have to pick that up first.
Right. So, and to undercut my own point, when you have 20 kids, you have to repeat yourself a little bit.
So I think
I understand.
So just to because I thought about that a lot
Okay.
when I was watching that. Because also, like, that is one of the problems that I had with School of Rock, is that School of Rock, he introduces.
He kind of pushed his own ideology.
He just pushes his own ideology on
Right.
them as if it is the correct thing, and that is free thinking or whatever. And that kind of misses the point, But in this, there are just like some subtle differences. First of all, I think that his goal is not necessarily to. Those exercises are not totally about going against conformity. They're about exposing people to something different from what they're seeing the rest of the day. Because remember, they got 8 classes a day, and this is one class that just is completely different than the rest of them. And some people engage with that, and some people don't. The cat sat on the mat.
The mat.
And he doesn't. He's not even trying to convince them that one's particular set of poetry is better than another kind.
Right.
Like
He doesn't
School of
even
Rock
trash
did, yes.
the poem. Right. He's
Right.
like, he knows that.
Well,
it's a
he
poor
says,
effort.
Don't let
he
your
says
poem
the
be
right. Yeah, he
ordinary.
says, "Don't let your poem be ordinary," which is the perfect thing to say there, because he's like, you thought you were being clever without saying this.
Yeah.
He's like, you thought you were being clever by getting out of the work, but actually you weren't. You're
just cheating yourself.
As someone who works in the classroom regularly, that is the dream message teachers try to get across when stupid kids say dumb things and they think they're clever, but they're not.
You learned nothing.
Right?
You cheated yourself and the game,
Yeah.
or whatever that meme says. So there's that, and then also I think it is very important that the ending of the film demonstrates that when half of the students stand on the desk.
Yeah.
If the entire class had stood
would
on the
ruin
desk, then it would completely undercut the message.
For sure.
But because some of them, and whether he actually taught them to think for themselves, or whether, I would argue that in certain circumstances, because I've been in a lot of people who think that they're Mr. Keating's classes, because that's the worst. That's really the worst part about this movie, is so many people come out of it thinking that they can be, like Community does the best joke when there's the guy trying to be Dead Poets Society, and Jeff storms out and he says, "This is no way to teach accounting." but like, I've been the guy that's like, no, I operate well within the system. I learn by reading or by listening. I'm not as much of a kinesthetic learner.
Kendall's all about the Pritchard scale.
So the redheaded Fink guy, he doesn't need to learn to think for himself, because he kind of already is thinking for himself. It's just that his conclusions are that he agrees with the status quo, right or wrong. Okay. But yeah, anyway, Ian, say your piece.
All right. So I want to preface this by saying I overall like this movie. Right? This is a pretty good movie, but I think it just overshoots its mark. So like, the problem for me kind of starts early. We mentioned the J. Edgar Pritchard scale, right? I'm like, as soon as they started reading the passage, I'm like, this isn't a real
people don't talk like
people
that.
don't talk like this.
Yeah.
It's a cartoonish version of academic criticism, right? Like, and that kind of continues throughout. Like, the villains, like, are treated as though they're reasonable, but they're actually like cartoonish mustache twirling, like, how evil can we be?
And I think that speaks to the cliche that we brought up earlier.
It's
that this,
extremely cliche, like, and like, why is the Dead Poets Society? So like, I get that they're going out at night, but like, a poetry club
Why
that goes and reads poetry, like, why is that even something that the school is opposed to?
Yeah.
Well,
It's extra credit.
because also working on the yearbook is seen as being too
frivolous.
Too frivolous.
Yeah. And then like Neil is getting straight A's, but his dad doesn't want him to be in in yearbook or in,
because
in
his
the
dad
play.
is emotionally abusive.
Right. But I'm just saying, like there's no, it kind of sort of expects you to just to accept these.
I mean, you didn't know people whose parents didn't let them participate in extracurriculars to a ridiculous level.
I didn't
in
know
school?
anyone like that.
I
no.
certainly, I'm not going to name names to protect the innocent, but like I can think of one person in my mind that was one of my best friends in high school that just was that her parents were incredibly controlling in a sense, and 100% would have said you can't be in the play,
But
or you can't.
yeah, just like as a subset of the overall kind of trajectory that I didn't like about it.
But I would also argue, if I could also interject, I think when you look at the culture of the school, which name I forget, but like
Welton,
right? And you look at the culture in which like working on the yearbook is seen as kind of a frivolous extracurricular activity, right? And you look at how stodgy it is, how overly structured it is, the traditions in which they venerate, the emotional temperament of the teachers, right? It's easy for us as outsiders from this culture to look into it and be like, this is kind of ridiculous and over the top, right? But when you are grown and molded and raised in cultures like this, and you are a part of it, and you are aware of the inner circle and the inner workings, you aren't aware of some of those silly criticisms, right? Like, it's the water in which you swim, and you don't recognize to question those things. And I think that's kind of what the movie is saying, right? It takes someone like Keating to come out and tell you to rip out the prologue of your textbook before you start to recognize that, wait a minute, some of these traditions and cultural values aren't healthy and aren't good.
Maybe
you just don't see it yet.
Yeah, I can see
it's easier for us to see it.
I still think like they could have made the same points in a way that was a little less over the top.
Well, and then the other thing to consider is, and this is not necessarily totally in its favor. Like this is me like defending the datedness of the movie to an extent. I mean, this is 1959, so this is, it's post World War II. They're being taught by it's sort of Keating probably fought in World War II. I don't know for sure, but like he may have, because he is much younger than the rest of the faculty.
That was set in 59.
Yeah, and he's like his mid to late 30s maybe.
Yeah. So he very well, if he didn't fight in World War II, then I guess he was living in England. It's very. A version of a headcanon could be that he fought in World War II. And that's where he met his wife in England. Because there's only so many reasons that somebody would go to England in the 1940s. But regardless, he is of that generation, and all the other people there are from a generation that was too old to fight in World War II. Like they're from a generation that grew up in the Depression. Yeah. So their perspective is probably different than us, and it was probably written. And this whole thing was written by somebody based on his own personal experiences. So probably was written by a boomer. So like it
was written closer to when it was set. Sorry, the movie came out closer to when it was set than the present day.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, this is a long time ago.
It's not even close, is it?
And our
it was
perspectives
set in 59. It came out in 89, which was 30 years
right.
apart.
Yeah.
But now it's
Yeah.
been 33
Yeah.
years
So
okay, that's a lot closer than I would have.
Yeah.
Right.
But and the only reason that you know that is because they say at the very beginning that it's their 100th anniversary, and it opened in 1859.
Right.
Yep.
But like, at least, and I wasn't around in the 60s, and I'm not a history buff like the rest of you guys, probably. All of you
Jeff,
guys know
maybe.
more about history than me, I'm sure.
reading a
But
book about the
I
Middle
do
Ages
know
right now.
about the mythology of the 60s. And there is an idea, and this being set in 1959, I think is very intentional, that it is set before the 60s, but right before the 60s. So there's a lot of so that is the epitome of the most
The
pent up,
1950s absolutely
The
produced
most
the culture of
repressed
that
conservative that exists.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the most and I mean that's why, like, the I can't remember any Christie, her thing that it doesn't even actually matter whether she likes the guy with the name.
Knox.
Not whether she likes Knox Overstreet or not,
Yeah.
or whether she likes Chet. Like, she just can't do anything because she's in this relationship with this football player who will murder anyone who looks at her.
Yeah.
Like there's it's
Her protestations are never "I don't like you," right? It's always "Chet will kill you."
Yeah,
if you
it's, "I
find out."
can't.
Right? Yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
Yes.
and it's I think that's actually like really that relationship is really carefully handled. It's still creepy. And
That's a very good point that they don't know each other at all.
At all.
Yeah.
You cannot be
They
telling a
give
girl
her-
you just met you love
They
her like
do
that.
give her a moment, when he's like, "You can't be here," and she's like, "Oh, but it's okay for you to come into my school and make a fool out of me."
Yeah.
But I think they handle that pretty carefully, and I also really like that he's so happy that he, went to the school and gave her flowers and read her the poem, and it's like it doesn't matter.
Yep, I just
if
did
she
it.
likes it or not.
That's
It's
all
like,
that matters. Yeah.
I did what I thought I could do, and I've totally been there. Not even with with romantic stuff probably, but like just in general in my life when I'm like, okay, I have this one shot, and that's what the whole freaking movie's about. Is I have this one shot to to do some I have to seize the day. I have to
He carpe diem successfully.
and so you do the thing, and maybe it goes well or maybe it doesn't go so well, but you did it. You overcame your fear, or you did the thing that you wanted to do. I don't know.
He carpes the diem.
He carpe the diem.
Yeah.
What
But,
else you got?
yeah,
What
so
else you
to,
got?
yeah, to sort of finish my point, I guess, right?
It's been a
Sorry,
while.
keep going.
Like it leads up to the finale. Like I think like not just the fact that it was a suicide, but also the way they handled the suicide, the way they handled the parents reacting to the suicide, I think it was just like a little too much, a little overblown. Like I could have done with it being a little more like implied or something. It felt
More subtlety.
It felt indulgent.
I don't know. I mean, I thought the way they again like I've had suicidal ideation when I was in high school, and the time that I got closest to it involved me going out in the cold. Like they really, that is how that that is how that works, and I just know that there were times, and I ran off to California when I was because of I didn't kill myself. I ran off to California, but it was because of that same feeling of being trapped and being like stuck. When he says I'm going to send you to military school and then you're going to go to med school, and he's like, that's 10 years, and even if that's not reasonable to a halfway sane 30-something, like to a bipolar 18-year-old who has only known this repressed existence.
That is all eternity.
Yeah.
That is it's a lifetime.
Yeah.
It's as long as he can remember.
Yeah,
His dad says this isn't a prison sentence, sarcastically, but
Right.
to Neil, it is a prison
Right.
sentence. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the emotions weren't real. I just think it hit a little harder than it needed to make the point that I was trying to make.
And then the way that it's handled by the school administration, I actually think is really interesting, because because of the time that it takes place, it's like it's an impossible situation, and nobody, like, there are people who their entire job is grief counseling and dealing with what happens after somebody commits suicide. Like, that's their and they spend their entire life learning how to deal with this stuff. This old this old man administrator for the school, he doesn't know any other way of dealing with it, and the only thing, and they have to have a scapegoat, because if they don't have a scapegoat
From his
Then it's-
perspective, this young kid could ruin everything he's ever done,
Right.
basically, to
Right.
build this
It's
school.
human nature too. When you
Yeah.
don't know what to do and you got to blame someone,
And-
you find a scapegoat. Yeah.
And also, like the other thing, like, from as a 30-something, frankly, Nuwanda was right. Getting expelled from that freaking school would be great.
Yeah.
Like you have. But also I I went to public school, and I know that, and I had a relatively good experience in public school, so I have no,
I still think that scene though was badass when they asked Nuwanda if he narked, and he's like, "Call me Nuwanda," and close the door. I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah. The names Nuwanda. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's and that's another thing I liked about the ending. That they look and his desk is empty. There are real consequences. It's not like they just completely reset and they just completely scapegoated the one guy.
Another subtle moment that I loved about the ending that I think ties into the theme really well is when Todd is walking up the steps behind the old administrator guy to head to the office with the meeting with his parents, right? If you notice, they're walking up the steps completely in step with one another, right? Which I think is a great picture and symbol for Todd in that moment having to decide whether he's going to conform or free think, right? He walks up that step, he's in step with the administrator, and then the scene heavily implies that he signs the paper, right?
He does. Yeah, he does sign.
How do you guys feel about that? The fact that they all signed and then they stand up on their desk
and they're still going to get expelled.
I don't think they're going to get.
They're not going to get expelled. They're going to get punished
because enough of them. Because enough of them did
it's just one and done.
Here's what's so beautiful about it, right? Because I want to go on a bit of a soapbox because of how great this movie is thematically, right? Is because the movie, one of the points of the movie is that free thinking is hard and it requires a cost to be paid, right? Even if it seems romantic and wonderful and great, when you actually have to do it, it's hard. And all of the kids fail at first when the price is asked of them, right? They conform, they sign the paper. And yet you have this incredible scene earlier, right? When Neil tries to tell Todd, you should come and be a part of this Dead Poet Society, and he's like, I don't want to. Stop pushing me. I'm not like you. You talk and people listen, right? I'm not that way. Leave me alone. That's not who I am. And Neil responds with something to the effect of maybe they should, or maybe there's a way that you can do that. That happens at the end, right? When Todd is forced to confront that choice one final time. He sees Keating in front of him. Keating is being humiliated, right? And he finally is going to be like, you know what? No, I'm not going to conform. He finds his voice. He finds his leadership. He stands on the desk, and then he leads, and everyone else and people follow, right? So I just love that because his arc is completed in a beautiful way there, and he ultimately chooses to free think, and we're left not knowing what those particular costs might be. Is he expelled? Is he not? We don't know. But the point is we don't. It doesn't matter, right? Because he ultimately finds inner satisfaction and integrity in the choice that he made. It's worth it.
But does the fact, I'm not saying one way or another, but does the fact that all of them conformed when the cost was really there, when they were definitely going to get expelled, only to stand on their desk when they're probably not going to get expelled, actually subvert the theme of the movie?
I don't think they realize they're probably not going to get expelled. I feel like that scene does a good job of zooming in on the students' faces as they're trying to decide whether to stand on the desk or not. And
also, the school really plays the dirty tricks card to bring their parents.
And the old guy's if you don't get off this desk right now, you're out of the school, right? Yeah. So I think they try to show in the text that the kids think they're going to be expelled.
It's not a fair ask. They don't have a chance to sit down and be like, here's the cost, here's the consequences. They're being manipulated and pulled into signing it. To sign the paper is barely even a choice.
And then also, the main character in the freaking movie is Ethan Hawke.
Yeah.
And when Ethan Hawke stands on his desk, he is risking everything. He is, or at least he's risking expulsion, which, again, to me, it's that's not that big of a deal. It's just freaking high school. Who cares? But to him, it's it's a big thing. He is risking expulsion. It is only when when he leads and then follows and then probably, and then maybe they all get it. Doesn't, you're right, it doesn't actually say. I had always kind of assumed that it had to do with standing up. That it was a message of standing up to bullies, and if one person stands up, then other people will stand up behind them or something like that.
I think it's really interesting that Neil, when he stands up, knows that it's a much harder choice. Or when Todd stands up on his desk, it's a much harder choice for him to do that, and much more risky choice than when Meek stands up at the end, the ninth kid to do it.
Right.
But even still, Meek struggles with it.
He does, and it's hard.
And Pitts also, I think, Like
Unfortunate name.
whoever said there were too many characters in this movie.
I did.
Yeah, Nick did. So what I think is really interesting about this, and I think this kind of speaks to what you look for in stuff versus what I look for in stuff. Like, I am all about character work, and to me, when I watch this movie, every single one of those characters has every boy in that class, even the cat sit on the mat guy.
And he stands up at the end.
Yeah, he does stand. Yeah, he stands up at the end.
Yeah.
Every single one of them has a rich inner life.
Yeah.
And they do there are a lot of scenes where they just do close up on people's reactions.
It's like School of Rock, but better, because the students in this movie have actual like arcs and depth to them.
Right.
And then of course there's the guy who's always wiping his nose.
Yep.
Like that's a lot of character development.
Yeah, and that was Jeff growing up.
That's me now still. I just blow my nose all the time. But if you don't mind, I would also like to get a little bit personal, because Kendall talked about his previous room. Because like I want to give a little bit more detail for why this movie means a lot to me. So for those of you who don't know, I used to be a pastor, right? And I kind of had a scenario very similar to this movie where certain things were happening and I was preaching certain things. I was an assistant pastor, right? So I wasn't the senior. I was the backup, right?
You were temping.
Kind of. I was preaching once a month.
That's a School of Rock joke.
Yes,
I get the joke.
But anyway, due to circumstances that I won't go into, my boss essentially told me, Jeff, you can't preach this way anymore, and you can't say these particular things, right? And he told me, like, you can't rock the boat in such and such ways. And if you do, like, he didn't say it, but he strongly implied that I was going to be fired, right? And so it was in that moment that I kind of had to decide, like, am I going to conform or not, right? And so I ultimately made the choice to leave because of that, right? But it was either that or like, just, I couldn't hold it anymore. I had to eventually leave, and I'm not a pastor anymore. I've left that field. And I feel like that was a high cost for me. I went to school for it. That's what my degree is in. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And I pretty much lost my career as a result. And yet, if you ask me, did I make the right choice? I would say I did. And I'm glad about the choice that I made. And I'm pivoting now. I'm trying to get into teaching. It's complicated. But I feel like making the choice that I made was worth it, even though I paid a high cost for it. And
he's a substitute teacher. He walks in every day and he writes on the board. He says it's a Mr. O.C.
Yep. Rip up your textbooks. But sir, we have iPads now. Oh, we're good. But anyway, in the end, like I feel like it was worth it, and so that's what I appreciate this movie. I feel like it hits me that way. So.
Also, I just want to mention, because this has been like sitting in my brain all day, and this is another thing. This is a very frivolous thing that I noticed. But at the beginning, when they're talking about the Pritchard scale, which also, like, I think is actually kind of interesting, because they do like draw the thing. But like, if you were to talk about like, well, how resonant is this poem, and you're like, what is this? It's like, oh, well, these are the things in it that are compelling and all of the,
yeah.
And then you were talking, and then you're talking about, well, and why is that important? That's actually a pretty good. That is actually a pretty good measurement.
It's not a bad way to do it.
It's still a conversation.
But it's like how do you get to that?
Yeah.
No two people are going to agree where you plot the point on the graph. But he graphs Byron, and then he drafts Shakespeare. Which, first of all, I don't know anything about Byron, but I would say Shakespeare would be low on the importance and high on the perfection.
I mean, Shakespeare is pretty important.
Shakespeare is important, but the subject matter in his works are more entertainment, as opposed to, and that's actually something that I struggled with in my own. I hated Shakespeare when I was a teenager because of that, and I realized that it's because everyone experiences Shakespeare in the absolute worst possible way. 13-year-olds reading it out loud.
Macbeth is so much better.
Well,
Othello is so much better.
I mean, well, I don't know. I'm not a Shakespeare scholar, but the point is, regardless of the material, 13-year-olds are not good actors, especially if they're doing a cold read.
Right.
And they're reading it in Old English, which they can barely understand anyway.
Othello, as a senior in high school, was when I realized I liked Shakespeare, actually.
That was, for me, it was Macbeth, but yeah, the same idea.
Well, so for me, it's Macbeth as well, but it's not when I read it, it's when I saw the Captain Picard version of it, Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
Patrick Stewart, and then also there was a Macbeth with what's his name? The guy from Remember the Titans.
Denzel Washington.
Denzel Washington.
That was really good.
I haven't seen that.
Did a Macbeth like
Just a
a
couple
year
years
or two
ago.
ago. Yeah.
Interesting.
With the lady that's in all the Coen Brothers movies, Frances McDormand as Lady Macbeth, and it was pretty good. But those are the best ways to watch Shakespeare, is like when it's like a actor that's like good and they're performing, and it's But anyway, my point was B, and then for Byron, and S for Shakespeare. So it's BS.
I missed that.
I did not catch that.
And I just thought
That
it
is
was
funny. Yeah.
It just like I had never caught it before, but it's like he does the whole graft and then you write BS.
Yep. I didn't catch that either. That's clever. Also, I want to talk about how much I loved I referenced it in the beginning of the podcast, but when he throws the desk set into the river. That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Don't worry, you'll get another one next
Right?
year.
Get another one next year.
It's
Yeah.
just a great moment of friendship, right,
It is.
between Neil and Todd, and there's not a lot to it, but you can just tell the two of them have really warmed up to one another in that moment, and they've grown to care.
My only complaint for that moment is that it's wrapped, and when he throws it, it just explodes in the middle of the air
happen? Yeah.
before it hits the ground. I don't understand.
It's more
It
dramatic.
was 1950s plastic wrap.
That's true.
So I think that scene and also the scene at the very beginning kind of is very speaks to Neil's mental health is different than everyone else. Everyone, all these people have their parents sent them to boarding school, so they don't have the best parents.
Right.
All these kids are dealing with the same types of abusive or neglectful parents, and all of them are afraid to stand up to their parents. There's a little boy is telling his mom that he doesn't want to go here at the very beginning and crying, but Neil it's different with Neil. And that's where like I said, like you said, he's a ticking time bomb. He's clearly it's not just out of nowhere that he does something drastic.
His incredible charisma is covering up his incredible trauma.
Yeah.
Right. And that's definitely, I mean, there's an actor in this film that
yeah.
That's
fair.
I mean, Robin Williams.
We see that in real life. Yeah, exactly.
Certainly,
Well,
he felt
To get into a little bit of memery, I mean, when Neil is talking about the desk set and how you'll get another one next year, this is really kind of a moment of the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, rope around the neck, first time.
First time. Yep. That's a good meme. I like it. Yeah. So obviously, you have the macro. You have the macro storytelling and themes that I think work really well, but I also think the scene-by-scene dialogue and writing is also phenomenal, right? Like, I mean, you can make, like as Kendall said earlier, yeah, there's some hokiness at times, and it's dated in some respects, but like, I really felt like I was there with those kids the entire time. They really felt like real 17-year-olds to me for the most part, right? Like, looking at naked girls in their cave reading poetry.
the way that I really liked that they balanced when in the dead poets in the meetings they balanced the like just like goofing off and
They were
laughing
just
at each
goofing.
other
Yeah.
with
Like, it didn't glorify the meetings into like serious poetry,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
They're being teenage
They were
boys.
just being teenagers.
but they still they still got there.
Which even when Robin Williams kind of talks about what he did, like, there was clear, like, it wasn't that different.
Yeah. And obviously he looks back and he's like, burn that photo. I was an idiot back then, right? And he obviously has grown up to that point. He knows how cringy it is, but they got to learn that themselves, right?
Yeah, he does, and he just does. So, there are just so many subtle moments with Robin Williams where he says the right thing at the right time. I mean, he's just a little bit too perfect of a character, but it's because the movie's not about him that he's allowed to be that perfect.
Yeah, he doesn't have to have an arc in this movie, right? That's not his purpose.
Yeah, great film.
Great film.
Anything else wrong with it, Ian?
No, I said my piece.
I mean, I know this might be a little premature, but whenever we get around to making our updated top 10 or a top 15 or whatever,
When we add 5 more movies.
yeah, I would probably include this one. I love it. So
Yeah. I mean, maybe
It's
we'll
School
see.
of Rock,
I
but
mean,
way better.
We'll see. What
depends how
Nick's about to pick.
It's definitely well. I mean, if we're talking about movies from this year, it's definitely the strong. Because what have we done this year? School of Rock, The Right Stuff.
Yeah.
Was Bullet Train this year? or
Bullet
last year?
Train, yeah, and is that it?
Yeah, I guess that was my last.
Or did it? We've done. I think
So
this is
it
the
was-
fifth. This should be the fifth one we did this year.
Hang on.
What was before?
Inception.
Oh,
Inception.
Oh, okay. I might like Inception better, but not by much.
No, this is. I mean, Inception. So the difference is, this is a movie that I always am thinking about whether I should rewatch it. Inception is a movie that it took this podcast to get me to rewatch.
Sometimes that's all you need.
Like I've definitely revisited Dead Poets Society, and I could see myself.
I think, as much as I don't, it's not my kind of movie. I think this is probably has a lot more to think about when you go back and rewatch it than Inception does. 100%. Other than how did people not understand this movie?
But is the top is spinning? So it's just like Inception. You see, if you don't know how it ends. If you look very closely, you can see the top is still spinning on the desk. So that means that they all were expelled.
Time is a totem.
Yep, he might have collapsed and fell off the desk, right?
Neil just went back up a level. It's fine. He's fine.
The totem is the book. It's the Dead Poets Society book. That's
There you go.
Yeah. Great movie. I thought it was exceptionally well executed, if flawed, but
Yeah, it was as much as I complain about it. It was a really good movie. I have to reach for things to find about this movie so that we have something to talk about.
So I did read that Roger Ebert did not like the film.
of course.
He thought it was schmaltzy and overacted and stuff.
Okay.
So yeah,
It was schmaltzy.
It was the Shawshank Redemption of preparatory school stories.
not as schmaltzy as Mr. Holland's Opus.
Yeah, that's true. Mr. Holland's Opus is
It
pretty
was
schmaltzy.
like pure schmaltz.
I like it though, but it's pretty schmaltzy.
well, Mr. Holland's Opus would be this movie if the entire time the entire faculty supported Keating, and it was maybe the.
And like
It was more personal life.
Well, like if the rest of the staff had come into the room and stood on the desk with
Yeah,
them.
exactly. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, which there is a moment where Keating makes eye contact with one of the teachers that he
The
had.
Latin professor.
Yeah, they
right?
wave at each other through the window.
Yeah. Because I do love that. I do love that. Like what he says is that Tennyson, Keating. I love when he quotes himself.
Yep.
Like, oh man, good stuff. So
It's my pick. That was yours, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
what are we watching?
I've been thinking about this a lot, and as tempted as I was to pick Galaxy Quest, we're gonna put that off another round at least. Although maybe Ian will pick it. I don't know. He loves space movies. I'm gonna go
Not
with
long enough.
with a. I mean, that's fair. I'm gonna go with a newer movie, just like Bullet Train. Try to keep us a little more contemporary.
What?
It's come out since the last time I got to pick a movie.
What?
Uh-oh.
And by the time that we actually release this episode, we'll only be 6 months behind. So I'm going with Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Nice.
I almost don't have to rewatch that.
I know, right? It's been recent enough.
Well, we'll see what we think about that movie next time on the KendallCast Movie Roundtable. This podcast is a production of the KendallCast Podcast Network. If you'd like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/KendallCast or make a direct donation through the PayPal link at kendallcast.ninja. Thanks for listening.